We have to become what Washington and UCLA are trying to become. Under center football, 11 personnel, 2 tight ends, running quarterback, QB draw. Have a plethora of a NFL playbook where you feel like you can push every button you need to push. When you watch those two teams play and the playbooks and the depth of playbooks they had, like, we don't have that. We have a playbook that still is not as adept to playing every scenario as well as other teams are. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports. Today, we're going to do a breakdown of the Iowa versus UCLA game. I think we just kick off with initial impressions. We've seen a common theme break out, and it's inconsistency. We have multiple home performances that have been really dominant in Washington and Wisconsin. And then also, you're stacking up 2 or 3 really poor road performances where teams seemed flat. The defense hasn't really played well at all. And the offense just hasn't done enough early in the game or has had significant lulls that have led to holes that we can't dig out of. Yeah, and the game kind of played out how we thought it would. We expected a really close game. We called it a trap game on our YouTube. Looking back on a trap game when you don't have when you play Maryland next week doesn't make a lot of sense. But we called it, the theme of it was going to be closer than people expect. Exactly. You look at the records, you look at UCLA as a program, you don't have this all right, they're not playing well, but then you turn on their game against Rutgers, Minnesota, and Nebraska, and you watch their personnel play for 3 straight games. Their front 7 had some real bodies, and those same 3 players that we called out, Oladejo, Medrano, and Schweisinger, all played great games. All had their moments. They looked like the better athletes on the field for the majority of the game. I think another great player they had, their D tackle, number 93, really controlled the center of the offensive line, and that front 7 played extremely well, and we expected that coming in. I did expect more success. I still thought we'd run for 150 yards if it was a close game. Our run game would be able to take us into the fourth quarter, and we ended up pulling it out for that reason. Obviously, Sullivan getting hurt and having the game he did was not what I expected against that secondary. I thought he'd look more comfortable in parts, and that's why I thought we'd win. But yes, we did lose to what they were, a 3-win team. Yeah, 3-win team at the time. That is more so, a team closer to Minnesota's stature that's been playing better, that has really key elements of important positions playing well. Garbers was playing extremely well. We mentioned on the pod last week, we think he's going to have a shot of getting some snaps in the NFL one day. Not starting, not being a franchise guy, but a 2-deep, preseason, he gets 2 of the games type player. And when Iowa plays these NFL quarterbacks, these guys going to be on NFL rosters or giving camp looks, and then UCLA obviously had a bevy of pretty high-end receivers that they get the ball to. Loya kind of stood out. That's just kind of the new reality of this new Big Ten. We're not playing Northwestern, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, who really can't push the ball downfield for the last 10 years. We've played 2 same-tier programs in Michigan State and UCLA, and they're in the same tier and they're the same level, but the quarterback play from those programs was at a higher level than we've been playing the past years. And it's kind of why we've had great defensive numbers, and now it's like we have to kind of make a readjustment of what expectations are for Iowa and our defense, because those programs aren't going anywhere. You have to show up every weekend and expect to play against good QBs and good receivers, which is not a reality of the West in the past 10 years. I mean, look at the Michigan State game and the UCLA game next to each other. Dominant performances by the O-lines of both teams. Really capable QB and receiver play between the two. It's a good summation of what we've seen from this Iowa defense throughout the year. Our DN play has really been lacking. You haven't had dominant pass rushers off the edge. When it comes to these long possessions where I was really looking for, 1 or 2 stops on first and second down to force you into a third and medium to third and long, what you're really relying on those moments is a guy to, when he has a clean pass rush, to be able to get through and make a play and not necessarily make the sack, but at least disrupt timing. I think what we saw from Garbers the entire game was he was just on time without pressure in his face. Again, if you have a good QB playing at a high level and you have receivers out wide, eventually those zones break down the longer they're available. And I think a good play to break down in this scenario would be at the end of the half, they hit that seam shot to Loya. Mm-hmm. Really difficult position for our defense to be in there. I think it was a kind of a odd sequence where you had, I think, a 3rd and 5 the play prior, and we bailed out and we allowed for an easy completion underneath, and maybe Phil had a moment of frustration, but you really should have, after allowing them to get into field goal range, just stayed in your shell look and backed up more and let them, maybe kick a 35-yarder rather than a 45-yarder. But we went to our double linebacker blitz, if you ever see two guys coming through the middle, usually that's going to be some kind of version of cover 3. You'll have a DN, drop to a flat zone, or maybe somebody's get to 7 yards. But what that means on the back end is that if you have an overload set, the seam shot's the throw that you have to make against it. And that's what they hit us with. It's like, that was just a super high level throw. To have that timed up where the two interacting routes were the seam shot by 17 that eventually caught the ball. And then there's a receiver inside of him that Castro has his eyes on, where he's running a 15-yard out. Mm-hmm. You could tell Castro's got his eyes back on that inside receiver. He's going to try and take that right away. He probably doesn't carry Aloya as far as he should have. Schulte's too late getting to that whole spot. And it's just, when a QB and receiver connect on that throw, it's like probably the most high-end college football throw you can make. And it's just a good demonstration. That takes a long time to develop. You need a pass rusher to get home in that time. And it was just a really good time to call. And also just the pressure on Garbers as Castro's giving ground there to trust that he's going to eventually sit. Because if you're sitting on that seam shot and Castro carries that any farther, then you're taking a sack, or the corresponding out route's just not going to be there because the rest of the defense closes in. So the timing has to be super high level on that. Mm-hmm. It was just all around a really high level play. But that was the theme for Garbers all night. He was really well timed up, had really good chemistry with the receivers. Guys were getting open pretty consistently. They picked on Lee a ton. I think there's many opportunities where we were in 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 6 looks where if Lee would have played it faster or played a more aggressive set where he could have had a chance to break up a pass, there's just a lot of catches at the sticks without a lot of contestment. And that was just an odd thing to see continue to develop for Iowa.
Yeah, and he could just attack the entire field. I think that was the thing that hurt us the most. Was that's how Iowa kind of wants to push your buttons. Want to be leveraged in a position to make you throw from the right hash to the far side left of the field. He felt very comfortable doing that all game, and I think he only missed it one time in the start of the 3rd quarter. I think he had a kind of a looping throw on a flag route that he missed by about 1.5 inches. And outside the start of the 1st quarter, he played to extremely high level for the rest of the game. Another really impressive thing, going to the opposite side of the ball, was how they played us defensively. They never had a roll down to a 5-man defensive look. And so they were able to hold up against our run defense with either a 4-2-5 or a 4-3 look, where even if they're in a 4-3, their outside backers play more like safeties. Medrano and number 10 were, they're burners. They're not these kind of thumpers at linebackers. So they can play speed even with, light sets against 2 tight end sets in some cases. And that extra speed they put on the field really showed up against Sullivan. And when you're running a 4-3 set and the way they played our backside read, so we talked about against Wisconsin where Sullivan always had this action where he was always pushing you the opposite horizontally and targeting your D end. Their D end was not in that play once. They said, that guy's not going to read anything. He's just going to come down the line and play the running back. So their 4-3 was engaging the tackle, shrinking the hole on the play side, and their backside defender was always their linebacker. So Medrano was the key guy because he's a weak side guy, and he can really run. And so essentially anytime Sullivan was keeping, he had the opportunity to read it. He'd read the play, but he always had backside responsibility, and he had the athleticism to run everything down. I think we saw even run down Caleb Johnson on a run where Caleb kind of went all the way to the left side, bounced back to the right, and looks like he had some room to the right to actually make a play. And Medrano ran him all the way down across the entire field and made the play. So it was one of those personnel kind of like holy crap moments. Like, this guy's playing really well. And then obviously 49 Schweisinger had 2 interceptions and had plenty of plays in the hole too. So it's weird to give credit to a 3-win team like UCLA, but we identified the front 7 as a problem in the pregame, and coming out of it, Oladejo had some plays too. Number 2, that front 7's really good. And they've, held Minnesota to 30 yards rushing. They held Penn State to a tough day. They made it tough on, a lot of good teams to run on them. So it wasn't surprising that happened, but it was surprising that we didn't have more just fluidity in our offense, given how bad their secondary has been against other teams. And I think that's the takeaway, is that we need to still stretch our legs and make us a complete team on offense to make this a real operation. It's the same thing that cost us against Michigan State was, our quarterback receiver combo. We had like 3 massive incompletions in the first half against Michigan State off wide open plays. And
passing the ball is always going to be difficult though if you're not having that first jab hit. And you talk about they didn't have to roll to a 5 front. So if you're running a forefront and letting everyone play fast behind it, that's even harder for your passing game to get going. I think the end of the day, it was guard, center, guard to D tackle, D tackle. It was dominant in UCLA's fashion there. And that's really where we've had a lot of our success in the season, is being able to create a lot of insecurity in that center part and then not allowing it to build out, wider. Granted, yes, the passing game has to be better.
Yeah,
you're going to have to be better on 3rd and 10 and 3rd and 6 and have, something that can develop there, because you're going to continue to play good D lines. You're not going to always have this dominant, interior line play.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway, is that you can't just always have your run game win you games. And that's the reality of the new Big Ten, is that we just played 2 teams in our, tier again, and teams that generally we play Minnesota-type like teams or Nebraska-like teams, we feel like we have an upper hand in the line of scrimmage, and we didn't in Michigan State or UCLA. It could have been that we were on the road and the emotion of the game didn't juice up our line of scrimmage the way we needed to. But if we don't have that advantage against teams that we are supposed to compete against, then you can't just say we have to have a passing game that has to play off the run game, right? So that's where I'm going to push back, is like, you have to have a passing game separate to only running for 150 yards on 5 yards of carry. So I think that's where I want to see Lester, be aggressive in the portal and bringing receivers in and not, just sticking with what we have, and quarterbacks as well, because we have to become what Washington and UCLA are trying to become. Like under center football, 11 personnel, 2 tight ends, running quarterback, QB draw, have a plethora of a NFL playbook where you feel like you can push every button you need to push in some sense. Like, you still don't want to become Wisconsin where you're losing your identity. But I think that's when you watch those 2 teams play and the playbooks and the depth of playbooks they had, like, we don't have that. It seems like we have a playbook that still is not as adept to playing every scenario as well as other teams are.
Well, it may be, but that's also a reflection of where our talent lies too. Yeah. Our talent is not our receiver room. So then if you're going to build under center game, it's going to be either through, running the ball or play action. And then if that's out of shotgun, then it's inside zone and QB run. And then maybe some quick action to Sullivan. We saw Sullivan, the back-breaking pick he threw is kind of a reflection of all of our fears wrapped up in one with Sullivan. Like, also the injuries that he sustained. It's, slightly an indictment of where he's at as a player. I think he also showed some promise throughout the game where he had some good throws. He was able to protect himself. And then he did the exact opposite where he took, too many massive hits. And that's really where Kirk's, fear is correct, is these guys who play off schedule, eventually off schedule comes back to haunt you. And the late throw over the middle is just an unforgivable thing within football.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we saw at Northwestern. He's a really hard time seeing the middle of the field. When it's the sideline or it's one read, he's got a big arm and he trusts his arm. But when it gets to crossing routes over the middle, it slows down for him. And then after that pick, he got happy feet, his eyes darted, and he wanted to scramble more against an athletic defense where he kind of needed to put his feet in the ground, step into throws, and test this pass even defense the way we had to have in the 3 drives after the pick. We just didn't see that. He did still have some nice throws, like the far side throw to Dayton Howard. That was like a 15-yard comeback route, was a really nice one. The Bowie corner route attacking Tampa 2, identified the coverage, knew where he was going, put it on him. So he still has like the capability to make the throws. He just Lester needs to work on, if we have a mesh concept in the middle, like, slow down. Don't look at the scramble right away. Like, if it's 4-man rush and you don't have pressure, you still can throw the ball. You don't have to scramble.
Yeah, I think that's the lesson is we'll give you plays to get on the edge and use your legs. We'll allow for that to happen. We'll use using QB draw, but don't make the true QB plays into happy feet games where, okay, if I'm not getting read 1, I'm not going to 2 or 3. I'm just going to start moving. And that's where he got to later in that game, and it really fell apart from there.
And that's QBs in the NFL. Caleb Williams is still having a hard time getting the ball out. So it's not like that's unique to him. It's just it's how QBs develop over time. And
that's how you stay healthy.
Exactly. And the crossing route, I mean, the first 3rd down and 5, I think we had on the first drive, Lester got Gill wide open on a drag. And it's like pretty much 1B to the route concept. And he just took off and ran and got smoked. It's like, that just has to be a hit the drag. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not a hard throw. Mm-hmm. So just that progression needs to happen. But I still feel like these last 2 games are big for him. It's a weird spot. He got banged up early. I don't know if he's going to play next week, but if he does, he still has the time to show that I can be at least a competitive QB going forward, no matter what the QB situation looks like next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just better decision making.
Yeah. Well, I think the next thing is break into just what, like, after you lose to UCLA on the road, you lose to Michigan State the way you did, you had the expectations you had as like a program coming into this year. Iowa fans are just in a weird spot. You're 6-4 with, 2 losses that you kind of chalked up as wins easily, and both losses looked like you were the worst team over the entire, length of the game. It's just an odd spot to be in from 2019 on. We've truly only had like one season like this in 2022 where, we're playing teams that we expect to beat, and then we kind of look like the worst team over the entire length of the game. It's just odd. And that's just this new reality of playing the new Big Ten. But like you see a lot of like, we need to move on from Kirk in the same breath, is that we're not what we want to be and we should try somebody new. But then you look around the entire country, like outside the top 4 teams in Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State. Indiana is the only great story of like a like program, not even a like program, a below program that's now it's 10-0 and looking amazing. But Indiana is the best story in college football in like 50 years. Like that's just a reality. It's like you're hoping that we hire the best coach in the country and we have this like dream new program. It's not a real reality for the majority of college football. But every single team, Iowa's like 5th in the Big Ten standings. You can go 5 through, cut out Purdue and Northwestern. You have like USC right there, who's got Lincoln Riley, and they've played Penn State down to the wire. Like Iowa to USC, there's how many teams there? I want to say 12. And everyone's kind of in the same boat, playing well at home, having good wins, losing on the road, up and down season. And it's been really hard to predict as of just like following the Big Ten this year. But there's just no program that you can point to. Like they got it clearly figured out. Like maybe there is no solution to this new Big Ten. Maybe we are just in the NFL kind of concept of a league where there is only 2 teams you really should never lose to, and 3 teams you are probably never going to beat consistently. You're going to maybe beat them once every 10 years, maybe Penn State once every 5 years, get them at home. But the rest of it is just really competitive, really similar teams that if they don't make plays, they're playing on the road, and they just don't make the critical game-winning moments in the fourth quarter, they're going to lose. And we just saw it, like, pretty much every team in that slop has had like up and down weeks back to back. And I think that's where it's just odd to be in for Iowa fans, but I don't think we're alone in that feeling of like, how should we feel about our program? And then you look at the standings like, well, we kind of should feel good, but I don't feel good. And that's kind of like how I'd summarize it.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to jump over and do picks for this upcoming week. Iowa's got a bye, so we're going to have a game preview for you.
Today's show is brought to you by SunSingles Sunscreen. Convenient, single-use sunscreen packets created for every fan's on-the-go activities. For a limited time only, find our podcast's favorite team's game day packaging at the link below for the next tailgate. And don't forget to use code 10GOHawks for 10% off your purchase. That's code 10GOHawks.
I went 3-0 last week. I had Penn State minus 13 against Washington, Kansas plus 2.5 against Iowa State, and UCLA plus 6.5 against Iowa. This week, I'm going to go with, I think it's 11 a.m. game, Ohio State minus 30 at Northwestern. Ohio State's going to have an opportunity to score 37 in this game. I don't know if Northwestern's going to score. I think they blanked Purdue. Northwestern's offense is in a horrible state with Lausch at QB. There's not really any fluidity to anything they do. They're going to get scored on a lot. Give me Ohio State minus 30 for that reason. My next pick is another powerhouse against a team that's kind of struggling right now. Give me Oregon minus 14.5 against Wisconsin. I think Oregon, once again, can put up something around 37, 34 points in that game. I don't know how many points. I don't see Wisconsin scoring 20. They just haven't had the success. I think Locke's going to throw picks. They're not running the ball incredibly well. I think people maybe get scared off against Wisconsin, against Penn State at home. Oregon's a different beast. They're playing a complete game on both sides of the ball. I think that's going to be, a 20-point game. And that'll be it for me. Just 2 picks. Just 2 blowouts.
So last week I went 0-2. My 2 first half unders failed me. The late touchdown against Iowa killed it. Just too many turnovers in that Iowa game. And then in the Penn State game, I took under 22.5. And my line was, I don't think that Washington's going to score, but I don't think that Penn State scores more than 21 in the first half. They scored 28. The two lines I'll go with Nebraska plus 9.5. I think this is more of just a hedge happiness. If Nebraska loses by more than 9.5 against USC, it puts them still in that limbo state of whether they're going to get to a bowl game or not. That's just going to be a fun watch. If it goes the opposite way, you can still get a Nebraska loss. So I think that's just a hedge happiness pick. After an 0-2 pick, I'm not going to act like I have any data to back this stuff up. And then I like the Oregon bet as well. You know, Wisco obviously has that data point of being at home against Penn State, and they played them tight. I still don't see Wisco being consistent at all against Oregon's defense. The games I've seen of Oregon's defense, they've been really impressive up front too. And then Oregon's receivers against Wisco's back end and Oregon's run game against Wisco's front is going to be, they're going to be very successful.
Comfortable.
And Oregon's still, putting together a resume of trying to be the number one seed. If they drop one late outside of this Wisconsin game, they're going to want to have data points of, okay, we had massive game control. Even when we went on the road to this middling team, we won by 21. We're still a really good team. And I think they're going to be motivated to keep this point total high.
Also, before we wrap up this episode, we'll be jumping over to the Patreon for a defensive line discussion. And for our Patreon subscription, that links with our Discord page now, which now behaves kind of almost like a boards for you to communicate with us on game day after new recruits are signed. So if you link your Patreon with your Discord, your $5 Patreon subscription allows you to be on that page as well, and just gives you more access to us, when we're not recording or not, putting out episodes. So please join us on that. But thank you. Go Hawks. We're kicking off our Patreon episode. I think it's the hottest topic, and something we actually discussed, I want to say after the Troy game, was our next running back recruit is very important to this scheme. And, Caleb Johnson's been so dynamic at the second level, and obviously a Heisman contender, like a legitimate one. And it's just kind of been a proof point of if we continue to bring in these type of athletes, where this program could, move to and in becoming the new Wisconsin. I think that's a game we just watched where we just bullied the crap out of Wisconsin. An aspect of that is having a really good running back room to, take advantage of a really good O-line.
It can't just be one guy too. Obviously with 54 carries, you're going to have to spread that around, and throughout a whole season, you have to build a stable of these guys that are playing at a really high level.
And we had a great selling point. We have this Heisman contender running back. You have an opportunity to sell to the 2025 class and sell to the portal class for this next year. Do you want to be this guy? And we haven't had that selling point for any offensive position outside of tight end for, I want to say 15 years, it feels like. Maybe, probably 15 years.
You had a little bit of a runway where you had NFL QB development, where you went Rudock, Beathard, Stanley. I think even prior to that, Vandenberg had a stint. Stanzi had a stint.
Yeah, it was kind of like a weird, hey, you want to be a 4th or 5th round QB?
Yeah.
You can
come here and play under center pro style football, and we'll develop you.
Right.
Usually your skill set, Matt. You would have thought, prior to Petrus got on the field, I was been like, oh, he's going to be a 3rd or 4th rounder no matter what.
Yeah, just how big of an arm he had. But going back to the running back room, this feels like a flop when you just type in Nathan McNeil Rivals on 3. It's like he's a 0-star recruit on 3 sites. He's a 5'6" Rivals.
And he's a senior. So generally, skill positions are like, holy crap, this guy's a 4 or 5-star by his junior year. Major offers come in, and you're battling for that guy. And when I first saw a 3-star recruit for 2025, I was like, crap. What do we do? Do we just, not take advantage of the situation of selling this room? And after watching the film, I feel the opposite. I feel like we've grabbed another Moulton, we've grabbed another Patterson, and this running back room, it's starting to feel like it's a Phil Parker room of DBs, where they don't have the 3 stars and these kind of high level rankings to them, but when you turn on the film, it just fits of what we're trying to do. And McNeil has some great components to his game that really resemble Caleb Johnson, but he's just 5'11" and not stacked yet. And you go back to his junior year film, it wasn't like this super dynamic junior year film, almost identical to Caleb Johnson's, where his film jump from junior to senior year was so dramatic that everyone was like, how do we get Johnson in the first place? And that's what I feel like with McNeil, where we're living right now. Yeah, and usually for running back recruits, they are on the scene by a sophomore.